So, Andrew, with all the craziness that is going on in Canadian politics, with everything that's happening, with the leadership of the Liberal Party in utter chaos, the recent prorogation of Parliament from our lame duck Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Donald Trump's inauguration, all these different things. What do you think the mainstream media would ask Pierre Poilievre, really the presumptive next Prime Minister of Canada? With all that stuff happening, what do you think is on the top of their priority list, Andrew? Would you have had the amount of genders on your bingo card? This is an absurd clip that just shows you how the media in Canada is just an activist propaganda arm of the leftist progressive regime. Check this out. This clip is amazing.
First day on the job, President Trump signed an executive order, the U.S. government only recognizing two genders, male, female. They're unchangeable. If elected as prime minister, is that something that you're going to kind of walk in line with, or what are your feelings on that executive order?
Well, I don't know. Do you have any other genders that you'd like to name?
Me personally?
Yes.
I'm just asking more so if you're in line with what he is saying. Do you agree with what he's saying? Is that something that you would be lockstep with if elected as prime minister?
Well, I'm not aware of any other genders than men and women. I mean, if you have any other that you want me to consider, you're welcome to tell me right now.
Well, there's personally, I am a man. As people say, cis man. There are people there who, they say they're gender neutral. Well, you're a man. Yes. There are people there who say they're gender neutral. Yeah. They say they're gender neutral. They're a trans person. Is that something that you would recognize here? Whereas in the States, at least with their U.S. government, the way they're seeing it, there's only two.
I'm only aware of two, but I mean, if you come up with another list, then you're welcome to do that. But I'm aware of two. And as far as I'm concerned, we should have a government that just minds its own damn business and leaves people alone.
I agree with that sentiment. But unfortunately, Andrew, and I appreciate how Pierre handled the situation, Socratic dialogue, answering a question with a question. These are good things, right? It catches that reporter in a stunned silence. Appreciate all that stuff. The only problem, Andrew, is I remember that Pierre Poilievre and every single conservative clapped like trained seals and pushed through former Bill C-4 that actually that enshrined in Canadian judicial criminal law, the idea that there's multiple genders and that the biblical Christian view of sexuality that actually corresponds to the reality of biology, that promotes harmful myths and stereotypes. So while we can say thumbs up, good job, Pierre. You did a great job owning this liberal media propagandist. I'm old enough to remember you clapping like trained seals at the idea of the installation of a law that would make it a federal crime to do exactly what you just did in a counseling setting. Right? So help me understand that dissonance, Andrew, because it seems like
I have a little bit of my take on this is a little bit different. And the first thing I'll say is what we saw. So while people are using this as an example, that this is the eating the apple with the reporter 2.0. That's what people are saying. This is him just completely owning this liberal propaganda shill. I actually, when I saw the video initially, I didn't think that at all. I thought Poilievre is very slithery and snake-like in his answer, because if he were a principled man, he would have said outright, yes, I support the idea that there are only two genders. So I support that idea. And no, there are not more than two genders. Like it's the same kind of tactic that he played when he was being asked by a CBC reporter not too long ago if he would, support another. It was one particular policy. Do you support this? And then rather than answering the question, he did a little bit of a political maneuvering and dancing in order to own the libs, but not answer it honestly. So his non-answer, his kind of slithery answer. That's the politician, not the principled man. That's the politicians. That's my first thought, was just say yes or no. Like, he's trying to get around to it. He's like, well, I only think there's two, but if you have another, let me know. I'm like, no, that's the wrong answer. That's the wrong answer.
Yeah.
That's my first thought.
I don't mind the shrewdness of how he interacts, but I agree. You could do that with also a principled answer and then actually an apologetic for why that is the case, right? Because especially if you know what the executive order did, it didn't just, it actually rooted and grounded gender in human biology and sex based on the gametes of the individuals. So it's actually a highly scientific, technical executive order that roots gender in sex, which it obviously had always been until you have the feminist movement kind of create a distinction without a difference. But you have another point that you wanted to make.
Yeah, and this is in line with what you said, which is that he doesn't actually believe. So there's a point and a subpoint. He doesn't actually believe that the government should just stay out of everyone's business. He doesn't actually believe that. And the reason he doesn't believe that is, as you pointed out, he is all for the federal government fining and imprisoning people for counseling them to embrace God's good design for marriage and sexuality. He supports that. So he doesn't actually believe in principle that the government should stay out of everyone's business. But let's assume for a second he really did believe that. And so this is the second point of the second point. Let's assume his belief is, yes, the government should just stay out of everyone's business and should only legislate on a tiny, small minutia of matters. That sounds libertarian. And we've been very clear about the fact that libertarianism is an untenable position and it's unbiblical. The biblical model is not libertarianism, because libertarianism always leads to autonomy, self-law, self-governance, and it'll always lead to the tyranny of the self, and ultimately the will of the people, and the tyrant will emerge. I mean, libertarianism in history doesn't lead you to the kind of flourishing and freedoms and elevation out of poverty and order and structure that we see in the West. So first of all, he doesn't believe it. So so again, this is another example of Poilievre doing the slithery double speak. And he just understands his base. He understands the political moment, and he understands that right now what is going to secure him the victory is if he's closer to Trump than he is to Trudeau. So he understands that, playing that.
Yeah.
But if he really is libertarian leaning, we would actually say, no, Pierre, the government, only where it's been given the authority, is allowed to be in your business. So he says the government, should not be in your business. And he would include in that the murdering of preborn babies. So murder your preborn babies, the state has no business being involved in that. And we would say that is immoral. The state absolutely has the authority to get in your business if you want to kill your preborn baby, or if you want to off grandma because she's old. So he's either being inconsistent and disingenuous, and he's not principled. He's wet finger in the air. What do I need to do to win? So I don't trust that. But even if he truly is this libertarian guy, I also don't trust that, because that is an unbiblical position that leads to a state that won't govern well. And he's basically telling us, I'm not going to do my job, right? My job is to protect and secure the rights of all Canadians, including the right to live and not having innocent Canadian lives snuffed out. And he's telling me I'm not going to do that job at all.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not principled, and I'm slithery, and I'm pragmatic, and I'm all about political expediency, and I'm not going to do my job, so vote me in. No thanks. Not really excited about it.
And the difficult part is, I know so many people, they want to take the wins as far as like conservative wins in Canada go, because they're so few and far between. And I want to congratulate him on a crafty way at dealing with the media that went viral. But we need more than that, especially in light of the fact that in Canada, it is literally a federal felony. It's a crime to counsel people that there's only two genders and that they're
$500,000 and 5 years in prison. That's the maximum.
Yeah, so, and he voted for that.
Yes,
his party was party to that. They pushed it through. His deputy prime minister is a lesbian woman who is totally bought into the alphabet mafia and all sorts of woke insanity. Okay, that's the reality. We hate to be the ones that have to be the bearer of bad news and rain on people's parades, but in Canada, good wins on taking down silly media propagandists does not amount to freedom, and it will not make Canada great again. So that is what definitely came to my mind. Thumbs up on the dealing with the media. Thumbs down on being an unprincipled pseudo-libertarian who ultimately was party to passing the very legislation that you're now apparently against. So,
and also,
I'll believe you, Pierre, when you revoke that. When you get into power and you make it your first priority to undo what you've already helped do, when you do that, I'll believe you.
Also, early on in the pandemic era, when he was for lockdowns and he was for mandates and he was for the jab, then he very much believed that the job of the federal government is to get in everyone's business and tell you, you have to shut your business down. You can't go to church. You have to get the jab. And the only reason he changed his tune wasn't because he grew a spine and he grew a conscience. It's because he knew what everyone else knew, which was the winds were changing in Canada and people were actually more supportive of those who would stand against the mandates. And there was a clear shift around the convoy where he realized in order to secure a base and in order to win over people who would otherwise vote liberal but who don't like this overt tyranny, I need to now be a friend to the freedom movement.
Yeah.
So he's not a friend to the freedom movement. He had no problem with crushing Canadians under lawless mandates. He's a savvy politician that will do what he needs to do to win votes and enlarge his base. And he cannot be trusted. He cannot be trusted.
Yeah, it's that sort of stuff that will not make Canada great again. I guarantee you that. But it is interesting to see, though, Andrew, because the winds have definitely changed. The fact, like, he would not have done that a few months back, given the political landscape. So that is one good thing we can take away from it. And that's something that Pierre Poilievre didn't do. That's something that ordinary citizens are doing. And if we want to see these sorts of things happen, then we need to signal to our politicians that the game has changed. The winds have changed. Great way to do that. Mega.ca, MEHGA.ca. Go over, get your Make Canada Great Again hats, mega.ca. Help support the show. We're going to have more good merch over there. We would suggest you go do that. Get one of these sweet new hats and celebrate the wind changing, the moving of the Overton window. And let's, as Canadians, keep pushing our politicians to push back against wokeism. That's the one thing that we have to definitely take away from this. And don't put your hope in slimy politicians. Put your hope in only the Lord Jesus Christ.